are just opportunistic, I would say, probably not standing at the next election, maybe hoping for some political preferment in whatever way from the Labour Party. And I just think it's making, particularly today with Natalie Elphicke crossing the floor, Labour were really uncomfortable. I mean, they were in more shock, I suspect, than we were. And I don't want to say that we weren't shocked, because we were.
The Conservative MP for Dover, Natalie Elphicke, has defected to Labour, hitting out at what she calls the broken promises of Rishi Sunak's tired and chaotic government. Well, Keir Starmer welcomed her to the other side of the bench just a few moments ago.
Can I also warmly welcome the new Labour MP for Dover to these benches? Mr. Speaker, if 1 week a Tory MP who's also a doctor says the Prime Minister can't be trusted with the NHS and joins Labour, and the next week the Tory MP for Dover, on the front line of the small boats crisis, says the Prime Minister cannot be trusted with our borders and joins Labour, what is the point of this failed government staggering on?
Well, Lara Spirit, Times Red Box editor, will be here in just a couple of minutes to answer some of your questions you had about the logistics of what happens when an MP changes from one side to the other. But listening to that was Alun Cairns, Tory MP, former Welsh Secretary, who joins us now. Alan, I mean, it's been an extraordinary start to Prime Minister's questions and pretty bad news for your party.
Well, I mean, I think there was probably more shock on the Labour benches than there was on our side. I mean, without a question, we were shocked to see Natalie Elphicke sit behind Keir Starmer. But having spoken to a couple of Labour members since then, I think they're a lot more uncomfortable with us. I mean, some have even said that she's further to the right on the political spectrum than Suella Braverman. So they don't feel fits there. I think she'll be a lonely person within the Labour Party, and we were just really surprised to see it.
I mean, she may have felt that she would have been more lonely in the Conservative Party come a general election.
Well, she's not standing in the next election, but so the point I would say is that she has been Labour's strongest critic on anything to do with immigration. So in fairness to her, she has highlighted Labour's failures in immigration for many, many years. I was just reading an article that she wrote in the Daily Express recently saying that Labour doesn't have a plan, that the policy to deport people arriving here unlawfully and illegally to Rwanda was the only way forward, and that how she praised Rishi Sunak's policy on that and exposed Labour's failings in this key policy area. So there's no logic behind it, other than I can only assume there is some sort of self-serving outcome that she will have sought and that she hopes to achieve. But I know that if she's been sort of promised a peerage or something like that, some Labour members I spoke to said that they would be not very comfortable with this and not very happy about her presence in the Labour Party either.
Well, we've asked her here on Times Radio. Matt Chorley specifically asked her about her views on the Labour Party's plans on immigration. Let's just take a listen.
Well, I think there are a number of things which she has done, and those
give me an example.
No, so the root and branch immigration reforms that need primary legislation, we couldn't do those until we left the EU. As soon as we left the EU, those have been put in train and are going through Parliament. And actually, they'd go through Parliament quicker if Labour didn't keep opposing every attempt to tighten up our border.
Oh, come on! You've got a majority. You've got an 80-seat majority. It is not Labour. It is not the Labour Party's fault that you have not passed the legislation yet, is it?
Well, Matt, you're asking me, why faster action is being taken. I'm saying that actually, Labour are not at one mind at tackling this issue with the same seriousness.
Yeah, I wonder what you make of that, Alan.
Well, she makes the exact point that I was trying to highlight. She makes it better than I do. So crossing the floor on the basis in which she has today makes Labour feel more uncomfortable, because wherever there's any sort of political commentary made, I mean, we can just re-quote exactly what she said about Keir Starmer, lack of a plan.
I wonder.
Don't recognise the importance of the policy.
Are you fearful that other colleagues of yours might decide to make the same move? Because at the very least, this is embarrassing.
Well, I would say even last week when, or a couple of weeks ago, when Dan Poulter crossed the floor, he blamed it on the NHS. And then I tried to make the point, well, hang on a minute, Labour's performance on the NHS in Wales is woeful. It's shocking. My constituents have much longer to wait than a constituent in England on the waiting list. So there's got to be some sort of logic or credibility behind it if someone is genuinely frustrated about a policy area. These are just opportunistic, I would say. Probably not standing at the next election, maybe hoping for some political preferment in whatever way from the Labour Party. And I just think it's making, particularly today with Natalie Elphicke crossing the floor, Labour were really uncomfortable. I mean, they were in more shock, I suspect, than we were. And I don't want to say that we weren't shocked, because we were.
Well, I think the Labour Party could refuse her if they wanted, which I don't believe they've done. I mean, Keir Starmer welcomed her over. We'll get more reaction from Labour politicians across the afternoon. But for now, thank you very much, Alun Cairns, the Tory MP and the former Welsh Secretary. Listening to that conversation, Lara Spirit. Lara, I mean, the Labour Party, we just talked about this, could say, no, we don't want you, but they haven't done that.
Yes, exactly. There's nothing forcing the Labour Party to take a prospective defector. They obviously will be in talks with that MP up until this point, usually extremely closely guarded talks. We saw that with the defection of Christian Wakeford a few years ago. We also, of course, saw that with Dr. Dan Poulter, who Alun Cairns, the former Welsh Secretary, just mentioned there too. So this, I think, PMQs as a kind of theatre, as the stage for this to happen, is the most obvious choice. That was how Christian Wakeford defected. You kind of take the Conservative Party by surprise. They are at PMQs.
Betray all your former colleagues and inherit a whole load of new ones. Yes. I mean, we had a really good question in from, I think it was Lee, who said, look, how is it possible that an MP who's been elected by their constituents, presumably because they believe in one political persuasion or the other, to just swap sides without, asking their constituents again, but they just can?
Yeah, it's a very good question. But I think it goes back to that kind of Burkean model of representation in Parliament, whereby your MP, after being elected, is seen as the individual who represents you, and they are therefore entitled to have views and represent you in a way they see fit. Of course, if Natalie Elphicke wanted to trigger a by-election, then that would be another question. But one of the interesting facets of this defection, and indeed of the recent defection of Dan Poulter, that former Tory MP and doctor who joined the Labour benches a few weeks ago, is that neither of them will be standing at the next election. So it's not the case that you can say, well, Labour are looking like they're going to win an election if the current polls are to be believed, and this is just a barefaced attempt to try and keep your seat in those political circumstances. Clearly there's something else at work here, which is why both of those, I think, are ever so slightly more puzzling to people.
This is Rishi Sunak's just managed to kind of recoup some of the positive spin from the local elections, and now he's dealing with this. So another particularly bad day for Rishi Sunak. We'll chart more of this progress later. Lara, thank you so much. Lara Spirit, the Times, the Red Box editor. It's a pleasure to have your analysis.